Right, I'm on my way to go fly today. Yesterday I drove out to Stick Rudder, met my flight instructor Leon, cool dude, went over the airplane, went over some numbers, expectations for today. Yesterday it was super windy, windsock was sticking straight out. It was not flying weather anyway, or not, at least not enjoyable, not conducive to learning. Checked the terminal area forecast last night for Boise. It said 6 knots up till about noon and 10 knots after. It's clear skies, winds are calm right now, so it's going to be fun. Tomorrow's another full day of flying, assuming this weather holds. It's looking beautiful. Like yesterday, I was a little bit skeptical I was going to get to fly at all. As you just saw, got to do a little bit of flying in a Kitfox. I didn't have any video or even still pictures taken while flying. Didn't seem like it really fit in. I was just a student, I was there to learn. At both Stick and Rudder and Kitfox, I asked if I was able to take pictures, and both places were happy to let me do so. I never did ask about mounting cameras on the airplane. I got the sense that they don't like doing that, so I didn't embarrass myself by asking. Besides, I didn't need the added distraction of spending the time mounting cameras on an airplane that wasn't mine. So I'll just go through some of the discussion of my experience there, which was great actually at both Stick and Rudder and at Kitfox, the factory. Great people in both places. So with that, welcome to episode 9. Continuing on with the wing build. As usual, what I like to do is get out some of the pieces ahead of time. So nothing that you see as far as the false ribs or the fuel tank are bonded in place. There's just me playing around. I do have the 3/8 diameter stringers bonded in place on the right wing, and I'm going to swap it out for the left later today and bond those in place. I did consider bonding in the false ribs because I have a few days before I'm going to take my wings to the hangar and start that fitting process. But since I haven't done the fillets around all of the spar to wing rib joints yet, those false ribs would just be in the way. So those will have to wait for a different day, but I did mark up the 3/8 diameter spars for the locations of those false ribs. And while I'm on the subject, most people, at least when you read through the manual, you may understand that the bottom false ribs are an option on these airplanes. You don't have to put them on. So if you're super weight conscious, I have the answer for you. Weight up the 3/8 diameter tube cut to length and the false ribs for the bottom side, and it's about 2.7 pounds, and that's before the high sol. So 2.7 pounds is 2.7 pounds. So if you're trying to build as light as possible, ditch those lower false ribs, but do install the top ones. So what I'll do now is we're going to go on a forehead camera tour so that I can show you some of the stuff, and I can wave my arms as usual and describe what it is I'm working on, my not philosophy, but the methods I've used. Little tool I made for marking those false rib locations makes it super easy. What you're looking at here is my right wing. Got the fuel tank down out of the rafters. It's just posing. Started getting an idea how that's going to go. You can see how I need to mark a nice straight edge on here and sand it so it's exactly parallel to rib number 3. And by the way, before, when I was mystified at what I was going to do on top of the fuel tanks, Series 7 Super Sport wing, nothing. The fabric goes right on here and sticks down. There's no additional cap strips or anything. I got that by looking at the airplane that I flew. I've read up on this whole thing, how there's a little gap in here. Oh no, what do I do? Well, you want to actually have the tank as far outboard as possible to give you access to these fittings for many reasons. Most of them serviceability and long-term care. Anyway, so I'm going to make this straight and then figure out how that goes, but this is again just posing. So these are the upper false ribs. They're just sitting here dry. I came through earlier and I marked them. For the locations, what I did is I made a tool. So given that it's 17.75 inch spacing in between, I measure it so I get 16 3/4. I need to split it in half. Split it in quarters actually. So I chopped this piece of extra tube that came with my project. I have one end that's an index, and this is just short enough that it will fit in between all of these except that rib number 9-10 gap. And I can just set it on here, shoved to the inboard end, just a random selection by me. I can make the marks. Make the marks pretty easy, as long as you make sure your index is always on the same end. You'll see how I cut a little relief on here. And the reason is, hopefully this works out, the adhesive that I have that's a squeeze out on some of these, it's quite a bit more than this. And so that would cause it to move out the index, and I'd end up with some, they would be tilted when I exaggerate it here, because the index would then be off a bump of adhesive instead of the raw wood. So this cured that problem. So in practice, when I come back, I'll just put a little bit of the high sol in these locations, slap the ribs on, and pretty much eyeball everything as many times as it takes. I already set these on here, looked at them from the end. They actually look real smooth, so I don't have to do any notching, reconfiguring, any of that kind of stuff. Word to the wise, even though I have them shown here, this is the bay with the lift strut attached fitting. You leave these off until after the lift strut fitting is drilled up, because otherwise these would be in the way. So this is my left wing with these stringers in place. I got these marked up, and the way I did it was back when I was trying to come up with a drill stop, and I went to Harbor Freight and I bought some useless crap. One of the drill stops that came with it, ignore some marks right here, this is a 3/8 diameter one, and I only tightened this just barely enough to hold it on here. But then what that allowed me to do was to go along the rib and just hold my Sharpie pen and spin the tube on both sides and go all the way out. And then when I did the adhesive on these, all I did was took the collar off, put adhesive, I just spun the thing with a 3M mixing gun, got them in all the locations, all the way down to rib 10. Then I just slid it in here and I spun it around some to make sure it was uniform adhesive filling the gap. And then looking backwards here. So this is my fuel tank area for this one. They say don't have it stick more than 1 inch, but I don't see why it'd have to stick any more than even just through here. So I made it so it was flush. So as the adhesive was getting ready to kick off, I just took a scale and slapped it on here and indexed this up to it and then left it alone. So I came back a little while later and I just rotated them a little bit because the adhesive was starting to sag, and just spinning them once or twice while it was curing locked those in. Before I went to Idaho, I reached out to Heather and I had her set aside 2 ribs of the newer style. And by the way, to answer a question I kind of verbalized out loud at one point, is rib number 1 different than the rest of the ribs? No, it's not. They're all the same. So that's... And recall, as I said, Leon worked in the factory doing the wing builds for quite a while. And he told me they use aluminum tube in here. And I mentioned arrow shafts, carbon fiber arrow shafts, and he thought maybe that was a good idea. So yesterday I ordered a bunch of 3-foot long pieces, and we'll cut them down and they'll drop in here at some point. Anyway, so with this little guinea pig piece out of the way to serve as a training tool, I will get out the new pieces I just bought. I'm going to etch and anodyne those, and these will be the basis for my etch and anodyne video. So sorry that's still holding up. I actually started to make it again. This has been challenging. My anodyne is old, so thankfully I also ran out of it. So I'm going to buy some new anodyne and I'll make that episode. And for the trained eye, you'll see that I have my left wing is back down here. I bonded on the 3/8 stringers yesterday. And so now I'm going to head out to my hangar, get the wing rotisseries, pop these sawhorses out the floor, and get on the rest of some of that work. So I spent 4 days in the Caldwell, Nampa area. Got there a day early. Got there on a Friday night, actually pretty darn late. Got up Saturday morning, had some time to burn. I went to the Nampa Warhawks Museum. Most museums, especially smaller ones of that scale, it's difficult to get any decent photographs. I have one picture I took in the back of the F-104 of the J79 Afterburner. I just think it's a cool image, so here it is. After the Nampa Warhawks experience, set my GPS in my car to Greenleaf, Idaho. Met Leon, got a walk around the airplane. We talked about some V-speeds and techniques, pattern operations, expectations of what we were going to do. And that particular afternoon, it was super windy. Windsock was sticking straight out. It was gusty. I knew they had a demo flight earlier in the day, which got canceled. Well, Sunday was my first day of flying. We met at 8 o'clock. The weather was actually calm. There are tons of birds live around that area of Idaho, so they were a concern. Took off with Leon. I flew in the right seat the entire time. I intended to switch back and forth, but given that I'm used to sticking the right hand, throttle in the left, and the fact that I intend to fly my airplane mostly from the right seat, it was a good opportunity. I'm used to sitting on the center line of the airplane, and of course it was a challenge getting that picture over the nose, trying to get it lined up. Sometimes I got it, sometimes I didn't, but didn't make any unsafe landings, didn't bend anything. So the plane I flew was their Series 7 Super Sport, had the same wing I'm building right here, had the Rotax 912 IS, which is the injected motor, has a big bore kit, so 115 horsepower. Be a good match. It was a good wake-up call to what it's going to be like to fly this airplane. The airplane also had Grove gear, which I'm still sitting on right now, and 26-inch airstreaks, which I have been trying to avoid, mostly due to the cost and the fact that they wear out pretty quickly. After flying the airplane around for about 8 hours on 3 different days, I kind of like them. I don't need the big tires, but they do offer some pretty good cushion, and it gets me a little more prop clearance, which I'm going to need. So we hit a lot of airports. We got some air work out of the way. As one of the familiarity exercises after I got some turns and climbs and descents out of the way was to drop down on a river, fly that. Biggest hazard was, of course, birds, lots of them. Fortunately, ducks are pretty smart and they understand the physics of air-to-air collisions, so they're pretty good about getting out of the way. That river branched into another one. I'm gonna have to put up the names because I think I got them backwards in my head right now. The river we branched into was narrower and tighter, and so it was increasingly challenging to get your turns coordinated, but it was a lot of fun. Then we hit several airports, paved, not paved. We hit some cow pastures, some small farm strips. Leon threw every type of landing at me. Downwind, crosswind, engine out from even miles away from airport. We did the impossible turn, which turns out to be pretty darn easy in this airplane. From 600 feet AGL, it was, I'm going to call it cake. It was not bad at all. It's still early spring in the Nampa-Caldwell area, so some of the places they might normally take me are a little muddy. And then there's also the wind challenges, which we faced on our flights on Monday. What you're looking at right here is some of the walk-around footage I took of the plane I flew in front of the hangar at Stick Rudder. I got to meet Paul, the owner of the flight school. He stopped by a couple times. We shot the breeze. Super nice guy. We talked about the differences between the Series 7 Super Sport that I'm flying and why it's on the gear and tires that it's on versus the STI that was sitting right there. The STI is a beautiful airplane. I love the paint scheme. It looks pretty badass with that big tall gear, big tires and all that. It's just not the airplane I'm building. Not to disparage the people who buy the STI wing and the Monster Shock gear and the gigantic tires and all that, but after talking to Paul, I think more than ever making the right decision with the normal wing and with the Grove gear, now I'm going to be pretty happy. And like I said earlier, the 26-inch tires, I'm probably going to throw down the cash for those. In my own hands, they're probably going to last quite a bit longer than they do. Obviously in a flight school, I'll do my best to take care of them. And other than that, they'll just be part of the operating cost of owning an airplane. So a third and final day of flying. I'm at Leon at 7:15 in the morning. We got out of there as soon as we could. The winds were pretty high, but they were at least steady. We flew into the Owyhees, where, as Leon's experience found, that sometimes when you drop down near the reservoir, it's actually calm compared to what it was like up high. Surprisingly little mechanical turbulence coming over those mountains. The Owyhee State Park was the first place we landed. That's where this picture is from. Did a couple landings there. Then we headed what I think is west, and there's a uphill cow trail that we, as Leon likes to say, shopped it, did some circles around, checked it out for gradient, any rough spots, greasy mud, picked out our wind direction, abort point, aim point, that kind of stuff. We decided we were not going to land there, but we still did an approach and kicked out at our abort point, flew upwind, flew several miles. In my head it was south, Landed on a road, landed on a small dirt strip. That's where the clip from the very beginning of this episode comes from. I approached a green leaf. I configured the airplane probably a mile out. Ground speed was almost nothing. Gave me a chance to work out my view over the nose. Landed pretty nice landing at Greenleaf, and that was it. So then it was time to drive back home. And with that, I think this is a wrap for this episode. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you in the next episode.